So yeah, pretty much I'll just be talking about RoboVault. For those that are familiar, we're a single yield optimizer on Fantom. We launched about 3 months ago. Yeah, I'll just be going through the process, how we got into DeFi, how we figured out what we're going to build, what we're building going forward. So yeah, just the team. So there's myself. I've got a background in finance and data science, a bunch of stuff on machine learning, etc. And then Smoothbot, who can't make it here today, his background's just in development, infrastructure, etc. And he's done a bunch of arbitrage bots. But yeah, first I just want to talk about my journey into getting into DeFi. So about 18 months ago, I was very anti-crypto, thought it was all a scam, but just wanted to go into how I actually got into DeFi. So yeah, previously before RoboVault, I was a CFO and data scientist at an off-grid energy tech startup. And yeah, our company, we work in about 6 different countries, and we're focused on solving the problem of basically 800 million people that don't have access to electricity. Yeah, so a few crazy things that I saw working at this startup that basically just convinced me that DeFi is gonna be the next big thing. So at the user level, basically spend a bunch of time in different countries, so places like Cambodia, Philippines, etc. You see all these people that are unbanked, but they all have mobile phones. So they're using cash for everything, but they all have the internet, and just the financial infrastructure is not there yet. But obviously DeFi can just leapfrog and provide them those financial services. Yeah, and then at the company level, just running the finances for this company, basically running a company in 6 different countries. We spent thousands and thousands of dollars on forex fees, international bank fees, had a bunch of occasions where our company's bank accounts got shut down completely, so sending money to places like China, where our suppliers are, paying for services in Nigeria, and that just like completely shuts the company down for a few days. So yeah, pretty bad. And then yeah, at the sector level, a bunch of kind of within that off-grid sector, infrastructure sector, a lot of it's kind of based off government money providing cash for infrastructure. And yeah, just observed a bunch of corruption where basically millions of dollars are just getting like lost to dodgy hands, going through these dodgy, yeah, basically there's no transparency of where the money goes. And then you just have like inefficiency in terms of how capital is allocated. So a lot of companies want to invest, but they're not actually willing to invest because just the financial sector is just so broken in a lot of these countries. Yeah, and then just looking at all this, it's basically like you have all these 1 billion people unbanked. Pretty much in the next few years, they're probably all going to have access to internet. You've got crazy stuff like Starlink happening. Yeah, there's basically just, I feel like there's just going to be an opportunity to onboard 1 billion people plus onto DeFi, and just leapfrog the traditional financial sector. Yeah, so that's pretty much how I got into DeFi. Just figured all these things out. Figured the financial sector as it is a bit of a mess. It's a bit broken. It's not working. There's definitely something better. Yeah, and basically just from working in the sector, in terms of DeFi as a developer, one thing that I've really seen, there's just instant feedback from the developer to the user. So as a developer, you're basically constantly talking to your users, whereas in like traditional finance, traditional technology, there's basically five different layers separating the user and the actual kind of person developing. Yeah, and for anyone who knows about Metcalfe's law, you basically get the similar thing. So I've just chucked the link in. I'll chuck these slides on our docs after, but I would recommend anyone to read the Wait But Why Neuralink article because it just talks about how innovation happens, etc. All right, so now let's get into the actual DeFi stuff. So yeah, basically when I first got into DeFi, didn't really know how the hell anything worked. And I think really the first step is just figuring out the mechanics of everything. Because there's a lot of complicated things going on. A lot of kind of dexes, lending protocols, they have very complex mechanics. Yeah, so I'd encourage anyone to just go through a bunch of these resources. So Finomatics does great videos on kind of how different DeFi protocols work. There's a bunch of other great ones. So Gitcoin kernel program, they have a bunch of great online resources, free to access, teach you about security. Yeah, just like a bunch of good, really good documentation by different protocols, which anyone can actually access and look into the nuts and bolts. Yeah, and then the next thing that we did as a team, we just built a bunch of simple Excel models, and that really helped us understand where is the efficiencies, where is there inefficiencies, how is everything working, do a bunch of simulations. I would encourage even just users who are like investing to do a similar thing because it can help you separate the Ponzi's from the non-Ponzi's, which is a pretty important thing to do, so you don't actually lose all your money. Yeah, so for those not familiar with RoboVault, what we actually do, so we build on top of a number of different protocols. So we take a single asset, so for example, if you've got some USD stablecoins, we'll deposit that into a lending protocol. So we use Scream. I don't know, Scream might actually be at the conference, their leader, but I think he didn't make it today. We then borrow a secondary token, say Fantom, and then we combine those two to create an LP token. And that basically enables the user to get a high yield on their assets. And then what we do is, over time, we have a keeper monitoring this position and essentially rebalancing the position to hedge the position. And yeah, basically we figured all this out from just doing these models, basically digging deep into the mechanics of how the lending protocols work, how the protocols of DEXs work in terms of LP tokens. Yeah, and basically in terms of how this looks for the user, this is over a 7-day period. This is tracking their returns. So over a long time horizon, they get a positive return, but over like a short period, say 30 minutes, they might make minor losses. Yeah, and basically we figured there is actually a gap in the market for this kind of strategy for users. So we looked at a bunch of existing protocols. So there's Yearn, which is like the kind of king of all single asset strategies. There's guys like Reaper and Beefy, also on Fantom, who do a great job. But a lot of their strategies they're actually very, very low risk in terms of they're up only. But they don't actually have strategies that kind of have a bit of short-term risk to get a bit more upside. So we figured there's actually like a huge gap there that we can potentially tap into and develop something for. Yeah, and then I guess the next thing is actually just digging a bit deeper and figuring out, is what you're going to build going to actually work? So one of the things that we actually spent a bunch of time on is doing a bunch of simulations. So I think this is another really, really good tool to use. So in terms of using Python, you can actually just put a bunch of parameters in. You can then tweak the parameters of how your protocol is going to work. And then that will kind of give you, yeah, it'll just allow you to test a bunch of different things. So yeah, I've added a link to our simulation repo, which is all open sourced. So you can go into GitHub and actually run those simulations yourself, tweak them if you're interested, see how it's built. Yeah, so yeah, for anyone actually interested in what this is showing, on the left, we've got showing like if you hold 2 tokens. So for anyone that's not familiar with how a decentralized exchange works, you actually provide liquidity to that exchange. So for example, you would provide 50% USDC, 50% Fantom, and then over time as the prices move, the price is basically determined by the ratio of those two assets. So on the left, it's looking at LP, how that value will change as prices change versus if you just held those two assets. And then we looked at basically the same thing, but using our Vault strategy versus the LP to get an understanding of how well is this strategy going to kind of hedge against market movements. Yeah, and then we were basically able to do a bunch of really extreme scenarios. So looking at, okay, if over say a 24-hour period, the market's very volatile, things move a lot, we can actually see how well is like this Vault going to hold up and how well is the strategy going to hold up. And that, yeah, basically just gave us confidence that in really extreme market scenarios, the strategy is still going to work. So it might take a minor loss, but over the long term, using the data, market data, we can actually see that, yeah, things are actually going to work. Yeah, and then this is just looking at the mechanics for rebalancing. So on the left, it's tracking price of Fantom versus USDC. So imagine the market started crashing, everyone's crying, everyone's losing all their money, but the guys in our vaults, they're going to be fine. They're going to do well because they're basically, this is a USDC vault, but basically the hedge is basically making sure that there's no massive losses happening. Yeah, so that's that. Yeah, so I guess in terms of actually building this out, turning into a proper protocol, yeah, a few really important tools that helped us a lot. So Crypto Zombies, I think, is a great one for those who want to get started in terms of learning Solidity. Added a link there. You can use FTM scan as well. So when we were first getting started, a lot of times we were just doing the transactions manually and actually seeing, you can actually review the code, see how the kind of contracts are working, see what functions are getting triggered. I think that's a really great way as a developer to just learn what's going on. Yeah, and then, yeah, you actually want to start writing some code. I'd say the best tool to use is Brownie, ETH Brownie. It basically gives you like superpowers in terms of how fast you can build things, how fast you can actually automate a lot of the things that go into developing these contracts. Yeah, and then you just want to have a bunch of tests. So Brownie, again, is great for that. And Yearn, in some of their V2 repos, there's actually some really great tests already written that you can use and basically co-opt for yourself. Yeah, so then actually launching the product, I think there's a few really key things that went into it. For us, we probably made a bunch of mistakes here. Did a few things that worked really well. So when we initially launched, we launched without a token. So most products, I think, launch with a token. They basically go all in on marketing, and then their product might not be all that it's cracked up to be, and then they just lose their rep. We took the opposite approach, where we just did no marketing at all before launching. We didn't have a token. We basically just released this product. Like, here you go, guys, go. This is how it works. Here's our docs. Here's everything. And that actually gave us like a great way to just slowly build rep, slowly get feedback from the community. The actual kind of people who are using our product were kind of early adopters who actually were interested in using the product, not necessarily users who are just in to just quickly just get in for a quick cash grab, which happens a lot of time with a lot of products. And yeah, even if you have a good product, it can ruin you if you don't do it right. Yeah, and then just obviously you need some exposure. I'd say Twitter is the best place for that. And yeah, I think the most important thing is just keeping the community updated into what's going on, constant changes, if constant changes are being made, etc. Yeah, and then actually having well-written docs is really important, because if you're doing something that's quite complex, you want your users to understand what's going on. You need them to actually be able to refer to the mechanics. Like, you're probably going to make some tweaks to an existing protocol, and and you need to like clearly explain what's going on. Yeah, so post-launch, yeah, basically we got a bunch of feedback from users. So a few things that we did. One, we upgraded our contracts to a V2. We got those audited. We built an analytics platform, and we're working on a UI upgrade. Yeah, these are really just like to continue adding value to the user, to make like the platform more usable, more user-friendly, give them more information, etc. So now the fun stuff, security. So yeah, to be frank, like we completely screwed up on this. We completely fucked up. So basically, for anyone not following us, a week ago, some developers at Yearn were reviewing our code, and one of the developers found like a potential exploit in our code where potentially like the funds could be lost. Yeah, and basically, luckily we had some fail-safes built in to our contracts where we were able to turn things off. We were basically able to disable deposits. We were able to basically remove funds from the strategy so they couldn't be exploited. Yeah, it's like, luckily for us, no funds were lost. But it was like a very, very important lesson. So I guess the first lesson would be the more changes you make to kind of an existing product, because we were using Yearn's kind of architecture, but we'd made some tweaks to try and simplify things. But the more changes you make, you introduce more complexity, and that obviously adds more risk that something could go wrong. Yeah, and then the next thing, I guess, is actually triangulate with experts. So obviously we are new to DeFi, so we don't necessarily understand every single kind of complex thing under the hood that can be done to exploit the product. But now actually we've been triangulating with a bunch of experts. So the guys at Reaper, we've been chatting to them quite a bit. They're like, know their stuff really well. And they've actually given us great advice. And then actually the Yearn devs, after kind of discovering this exploit and kind of telling us it's there, they've just provided a bunch of insight into how to make sure that it's not there when we re-release our product. Yeah, and then I guess the other thing is just really separating security in the development process. It's easy to kind of just get blinkers on and just kind of be 100% focused on just optimizing all the mechanics, and you can easily just ignore one vulnerability that's there. So I think, yeah, and also on the previous slide you saw that we did get our code audited. And I think the mistake there was getting it audited by a company, like the auditors did a good job, but they're not necessarily experts in this area of kind of complex strategies. So actually getting kind of someone to review your code who actually is an expert in the area that you're working in, not just trying to get an audit as like a stamp of approval, which is like what happens all of the time. And that's when kind of things get missed, and yeah, we had something missed, but luckily no funds were lost. But yeah, things can get missed. No one's actually like done anything malicious. It's just like mistakes are made and then funds get lost, which basically you want to avoid. Yeah, and then the last thing that we're going to do is basically Immunify. We're basically going to have an ongoing security process where you can have bug bounties. So that means if anyone reviewing your code finds an exploit, they can notify you and they receive a reward for that. Yeah, so yeah, I think that's basically security is the most important thing. In a way, the fact that we did have this kind of 50 million potential exploit there invalidates a lot of the stuff that we actually did in the earlier stages, because obviously we should have had much more focus on security. Yeah, I think just wanted to open the presentation up for questions. I've kept it very high level because not sure what everyone's that interested in. I'll put these slides up on our documentation, so anyone can access the links to any of these resources. Yeah, but yeah, just wanted to open it up to questions and have a conversation with anyone who's made it today. Come on, guys. All right, I can tell you guys a joke if you want.
How has that been, like leaning on community members for that? I guess just to repeat for the mic, how has that been managing community with such a small team of only 2 people? And what are ways that you've had like your community help you with that, I guess?
Yeah, so I think we were lucky in terms of us just starting very small. So kind of the first users that joined were actually really interested in the product. And those guys in turn have actually helped us manage like the community. So for example, in our Discord, we have a bunch of people who are early users who just kind of are constantly in there answering questions or just actually helping with a bunch of stuff. So yeah, that's like a really important thing, actually leveraging community members to help you grow, whether that's with marketing, whether that's with kind of content, whether that's just answering user questions. You can actually normally find people in the community that will help you manage the community. Yeah.
Thank you.
We've got another question down here. We need you to keep going a bit because our next session is live from the US. So we've got some time to fill. So please keep the questions coming, guys.
All the questions from all of you.
Hey man, awesome presentation, buddy. So what steps are still like yet to do before RoboVault can relaunch?
Yeah, so basically we've in the background been talking with some like developers at Yearn. They've basically just shared a bunch of insights into how we avoid these things. We've actually already got the code running in the background and just like testing it ourselves. But we actually do want to get it more heavily reviewed by some actual experts before we do re-release. Because we have actually already patched up the vulnerability, but I think we just want to take our time and make sure that it is heavily reviewed by experts in that field who actually kind of fully understand these potential vulnerabilities from flash loans, because they are quite complex. For example, I think 2 days ago there was a massive flash loan exploit on Cream, where like $160 million or something in that figure got lost. So it is like a very complicated thing, and it just shows you if you do the more complex thing that you're doing, you want to take your time and not rush. So yeah. Really just getting it reviewed by actual experts who can fully make sure that there's nothing there that can be exploited.
Awesome, thanks man. And I want to hear the joke, by the way, if you got one. Just fire away.
All right, any other questions? Chats, discussions, conversations? Anybody? There are some questions online, which is excellent. We'll throw them to you right now. So, hi guys, do you have an example of your Excel spreadsheet for analyzing protocols, and what kind of metrics do you track?
Yeah, so there's already some in our docs, like we've shared pretty much all our simulations and spreadsheets in our docs, but I'll post this spreadsheet up, I'll post the presentation up which has links. In terms of metrics, really just looking at, so what actually is, for example, most protocols, lending protocols, vaults, the biggest thing determining how the performance is market price. So then you can kind of build a simulation where you look at different variations of the market price and then see how does that actually impact the protocol. So what do you want to track fees? Do you want to track kind of reward? Do you want to track yield? Really depends on what the protocol you're looking at. Yeah.
All right, well, that is actually all the questions that we have online. So if there are no questions here, there are questions here. We love questions. Go on, who's got a question?
Me again. Any plan to expand beyond single asset strategies?
So I think we just want to like focus on that as our niche. There are like some potential LP strategies that we could do, but yeah, we're a team of 2 people. We don't want to try and do too much, spread ourselves too thin. We're also working on a second protocol, which will do some other stuff, but that's quite a while away, as like just these single asset strategies are the main focus.
I've got another one here from online. It says, are you expecting weeks or months before coming back online?
I mean, ideally we're targeting probably 2 weeks, but yeah, obviously we don't want to like commit to any timeline because yeah, we just want to make sure everything's completely right. There's nothing that can go wrong before actually launching. Yeah, it'd be a mistake to just rush back into it and actually have something that's vulnerable going live.